She vowed to save lives, until the day she had to take one. In the final year of the Second World War, the German occupation of Poland had entered its most brutal phase. Warsaw, the nation's capital, was a city of contradictions. Entire districts lay in ruins after years of resistance and reprisals, yet pockets of life persisted in the unlikeliest of places. The population lived under constant surveillance, with curfews enforced at gunpoint and the knowledge that any knock on the door after dark could mean arrest, deportation, or execution. Food was scarce, information even scarcer, and trust almost non-existent. Within this environment, the occupying forces maintained their own spaces of order and control. One of these was a military hospital on the outskirts of Warsaw, a facility reserved for wounded German personnel. Here, the war was visible only in the injuries of the patients, and in the tight security at every entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was clinical and regimented, whitewashed walls, polished floors, the smell of antiseptic cutting through the air. It was a controlled space in an uncontrolled world. Among the Polish civilians employed there was a young nurse named Zofia Lewandowska. 26 years old, she had trained in Warsaw before the outbreak of war, completing her medical qualifications just months before the German invasion in 1939. The occupation had turned her career path upside down. Instead of working in public hospitals for her fellow citizens, she found herself serving in a facility run by the enemy. Her employment there was not by choice, but by necessity, and by opportunity. Through contacts in the underground Polish Home Army, she was recruited as a courier. The hospital, with its steady flow of patients and supplies, was an ideal cover for moving intelligence. Orders from the resistance would arrive concealed in legitimate hospital paperwork, and reports from the front lines or enemy communications would be smuggled out hidden in supply crates, laundry bags, or even in the hems of uniforms. On her right hand, beneath her gloves, she wore a plain gold ring. To a casual observer, it was simply an unremarkable piece of jewelry. In reality, it was a specially crafted device with a concealed compartment. Inside was a single capsule of crystalline cyanide, deadly in even the smallest quantity. The ring had been issued to her by the resistance not for offensive use, but as a last resort measure in the event of capture. Under Gestapo interrogation, survival was unlikely, and silence was nearly impossible. The poison was her escape from both. For years she had carried the ring without ever opening its hidden compartment. The thought of using it on anyone else had never entered her mind. Her role was to heal, to pass information, and to endure the occupation until liberation. That changed in early 1944. It began with the arrival of a new patient, Obersturmbannführer Karl Reinhardt, a senior officer of the Gestapo. He was brought in under heavy guard after sustaining injuries in an ambush on the outskirts of the city. His presence immediately altered the atmosphere of the hospital. Security tightened, orders became sharper, and the already tense staff worked with an added layer of caution. Zofia knew Reinhardt by reputation and by sight. Years earlier, he had overseen operations in her home region during a pacification campaign against suspected resistance activity. Entire villages had been burned, their inhabitants executed or deported. Zofia's father had been publicly hanged during one such operation, and her younger brother was shot while trying to flee. Though she had never spoken to Reinhardt, his face was imprinted in her memory from those days. He was now bedridden in her ward, his injuries serious but not fatal. Orders from the German doctors made it clear that his recovery was a priority. His position within the Gestapo meant that his survival was considered important to ongoing operations in Warsaw. For Zofia, this was not simply another patient, it was a man directly responsible for the deaths of her family and for the suffering of countless others. Within days of his admission, the resistance learned of Reinhardt's presence in the hospital. Intelligence gathered through informants revealed that he was in Warsaw to coordinate a series of mass deportations scheduled to take place before the anticipated outbreak of the Warsaw Uprising. If allowed to recover and resume his duties, thousands of civilians, men, women, and children, would be sent to concentration camps. The message from the underground was blunt: Reinhardt must not leave the hospital alive. For Zofia, the instruction was both clear and unbearable. She was the only member of the resistance with direct, unsupervised access to him. The method was obvious. The ring she carried every day contained the means to kill him quickly and without trace. In the sterile environment of the hospital, his death would be recorded as a sudden medical complication from his injuries. The cyanide, properly administered, would leave no visible signs. And yet the act itself presented not only logistical challenges, but moral ones. Zofia had taken an oath as a nurse to preserve life. She had never killed anyone. Even in war, there was a difference between aiding a cause through covert work and directly ending a human life. Each time she approached his bedside, the gold band pressed into her skin, reminding her of what she could do, and of what it would mean. In the days that followed, opportunities presented themselves. There were moments when the guards stepped away, when other nurses were absent, when the corridors outside were empty. She could have opened the ring, tilted her hand over a cup of tea or broth, and ended his life in seconds. But each time, hesitation overcame her. Whether it was the sound of approaching footsteps, the fear of being discovered, or the weight of the decision itself, she found herself closing the hinge and resuming her duties as if nothing had changed. Her reluctance did not go unnoticed by the resistance. Messages arrived with increasing urgency, some delivered through coded language and supply lists, others hidden in the seams of medical gowns. The date of his transfer from the hospital was set. There were only 2 days left before he would be moved under heavy escort to a secure location, beyond the reach of anyone in Warsaw. The order came again: he must be eliminated before then. On the morning of his final full day in the hospital, the opportunity came. Zofia prepared his breakfast herself, dismissing assistance from others. In the quiet of the ward, she opened the ring. The hinge moved without sound. The capsule tipped, releasing the cyanide into the steaming tea. It dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. She carried the tray to his bedside and placed it within his reach. As he drank, she monitored him from her post. The effects were rapid. Within moments, his breathing altered, his hands weakened, and his skin lost its color. There was no struggle, no noise, only a gradual fading until his body lay still. By the time the German doctors arrived, it was too late. His death was recorded as a sudden cardiac arrest brought on by complications from his injuries. The guards outside his room dispersed within hours. His body was prepared for transfer, but the threat he represented to Warsaw had ended in that room. Zofia reported the completion of the mission to her contact in the supply room. The gold ring, now empty, was handed over. She returned to her duties without outward sign of what she had done. In the official records of the hospital, the death of Obersturmbannführer Karl Reinhardt was unremarkable, one of many casualties of the war. No investigation was launched. The deportation plans he had been sent to oversee were delayed and disrupted. The Warsaw Uprising began months later, under conditions far different from those his orders would have created. For Zofia, the act was both an end and a beginning. The ring was gone, but its weight remained with her. In the cold, factual language of military history, her action was a tactical success that saved thousands. But in her own private reckoning, it was a moment when she crossed a line she could never uncross. This was the reality of resistance in occupied Europe. Decisions made in shadows, measured not in personal morality but in lives saved or lost. Zofia Lewandowska remained a nurse until the end of the war, continuing her covert work without drawing suspicion. She never spoke publicly of the events in that hospital room. The truth survived only in the hidden reports of the Polish underground, preserved in archives long after the war had ended. It stands as one of countless untold stories from those years, a young woman trained to save lives, forced by the brutality of occupation to take one instead.